Hello and welcome to GameSack. It's time to take a look at the 64DD for the Nintendo 64. This was their attempt to expand the capabilities of the console. Nintendo was pretty weary of CD technology at the time, and well, you know Nintendo, they don't like to do what everyone else is doing anyway. So, what is the 64DD? Well, let's take a quick look. The Nintendo 64DD was released only in Japan in December of 1999. It's a disk drive that uses magnetic floppy disks as a storage medium. Each disk can hold 64 megabytes of data. The disks themselves can have up to 38 megabytes of writable space. It attaches to the bottom of the Nintendo 64 and locks into place with 2 thumb screws. You need the 4 megabyte expansion pack in your Nintendo 64 to run the machine. This was included in some bundles. You'll get this screen if you don't have it. The 64DD is not region locked. However, to use any of the cartridges, you'll need a console that can accept Japanese carts. Powering the 64DD is, well, not much. It doesn't add any new abilities other than being able to read and write to floppy disks and a real-time clock. It also has 36 megabits of ROM for a library of fonts and even sound clips to help free up space on the disks. The disk access is quite fast in bursts, quicker than a CD, but it's not ideal for streaming data like video. The RandNet modem cartridge was included in certain bundles, which gives you blazing internet access at 22.8 kilobits per second. The discs themselves come in hard jewel cases, similar to CD cases. There were initially plans for an international release, but those plans were quickly canceled. Overall, the 64DD saw 10 discs released, and the peripheral sold around 15,000 units before it was discontinued a little over a year after it was introduced. I should also mention that unlike the Sega CD, the 64DD does not need its own power supply. It gets everything it needs from the Nintendo 64 itself. Also, many, if not all of the discs have been converted to run off flash carts like an EverDrive, so you can play these games on real hardware without having to worry about having the 64DD itself. You might have issues saving though. Anyway, let's take a look at all 10 discs available for the 64DD. First up, we have the exciting RandNet disc, which comes with the 64DD. This was basically Nintendo's online service back then, and of course it's no longer working for me now, especially with me being based in the United States. Every time I do something, it tries to dial out. You of course need the RandNet modem cartridge inserted, and when it dials you'll see a green LED light up. Ooh, pretty. It rings and rings, but sadly nobody ever answers. You can create profiles and put in your name and stuff, and it will all be saved to the disk. You can read and send emails, and it looks like you might even have been able to do some banking or money stuff. Not really much more to say about this one, especially these days. This one is SimCity 64 from HAL Laboratories. Of course, as with all of these games, being entirely in Japanese does not help me play them at all. The green-haired dude fills you in on all the details as you input your name and the name of your city. He goes on to explain the controls of the game and the things that you need to do to grow your city to become successful. The actual gameplay screen is full of different options you can do, none of which I can figure out, unsurprisingly. Fortunately, there's an English translation, so let's try that. Haha, yes, much better. Now I can see what everything is without having to guess just by the icon alone. You have a limited amount of money, and each thing you add to your city, like roads, electricity, residential areas, and whatnot, all have a price attached to them. You need to be careful how you plan your city, otherwise you might end up with a high unemployment rate like I have here. I'm still getting the hang of this one, but can see how it might be kind of addictive, especially as your city grows and becomes more unique. It certainly seems like an upgrade to the SimCity game that was on the Super Nintendo, but I never played that one a whole lot either. You can ask the green-haired dude for some advice in your particular situation, and whoops, I guess not everything is translated yet. Oh well, it's translated enough to be enjoyable for now. The isometric graphics are decent enough, though the frame rate can be pretty choppy when moving or rotating. As mayor, you can even roam the streets in first-person mode and talk to people. While this part is a bit choppy, it seems less so than the overhead portions of the game. Still, the Super NES certainly couldn't do this with this wimpy Mode 7. The music is nice, and it had better be because you'll be hearing it quite a bit as you play. It probably goes without saying that it saves your data to the disk as you progress so you can keep it forever and ever. That's right, you don't even have to worry about changing the battery. Take a look at this other city that was already on the disk. Whoever made this spent a lot of time on it, and wow, is it ever choppy to move around. It might be too much detail for the system to adequately handle because we all know HAL knows what they're doing when it comes to programming. Seriously, they're legit. Overall, this is a fun game with good music that makes great use of the writing abilities of the 64DD, and I just wish it weren't so sluggish. This weird game is called Doshin The Giant One. This one reminds me a lot of Populous in that it's kind of a god game, except that you control a giant walking giant to do what you need or want to do. There are little people running around the various islands and you can do things to help them out. Often they'll want you to transform a barren area so it can be more hospitable to life. You do this by picking up a plant from somewhere else, bringing it over, and dropping it on the barren area. It's now fertile, and the little inhabitants release hearts, which of course means they love you. You absorb this love, and once you get enough love, you grow. The more love you get, the more you grow. Yeah. You can also do things like jump to flat and bumpy land and even create lakes. Or you can pull up the land to get rid of lakes where the inhabitants don't want them. You can call up a map by pressing down on the D-pad to see where the various islands are. Be careful because in addition to earning love, you can also earn hate, which is represented by the little skulls. You can earn hate by crushing the inhabitants' buildings or stepping on them, causing them to die forever, which means they'll never have a chance of accomplishing their hopes and dreams. If you tap the right shoulder button, you change from the benevolent yellow Doshin to the evil red Jashin. Instead of picking things up, he flails his arms around, destroying everything within his reach. This, of course, will net you more and more hate. Once you fill up with hate, you grow. That's right, love or hate, you grow on their emotions no matter what it is. Tap the right shoulder button again to turn back into the peace-loving yellow Doshin. No matter how big you get from either love or hate, you'll reset in size after the day ends and you begin the next. All while you're doing this, this character speaks to you in Japanese, explaining the game and telling you other things. There is actually quite a lot of voice in this game. The controls are fairly easy to figure out. The yellow C buttons control the camera, but they're backwards from what I expect, meaning pressing the left C button rotates the camera the opposite way that I want it to. I could not get used to this. The visuals are pretty typical for the Nintendo 64, if not a little worse. The draw distance isn't very far. This doesn't really affect the gameplay, however. The sound and music are what you'd expect from a typical Nintendo game, though this was only published by them. It was actually developed by an outfit called Peripheral. The Doshin games are the only ones that they ever seem to have made. Overall, this is an enjoyable and unique title. You don't need to know Japanese to play it and figure it out, but it's too bad that this one wasn't released in English. Actually, it did get an English version later on the GameCube, but only in Europe. I like the visual upgrades here, but I find the 64DD version more enjoyable to play. Anyway, give this one a try somehow if you can. Then there's Doshin the Giant Tinkling Toddler Liberation Front. Assemble! This is a weird extension and the first game is required. Basically, you're a kid who's trying to get to sleep and you're trapped in the nightmare and get sucked out the window or something. You wander around and I have no clue what's going on here. You can tinkle hearts with the Z button, yeah, and you have a heart gauge on the bottom right. I guess maybe that's your bladder, I don't know. Sometimes it wants you to input the disk for the first Doshin game to read your progress from that one. I can't do that because I don't have the disk for the second game. And yeah, it looks like that's not going to happen either. Anyway, I'm playing this one as a ROM that's been converted to run off of an EverDrive. It won't activate the 64DD even if I have the first Doshin game inserted. So there's really not much I can do here. It is kind of an interesting way to extend a game though. I always enjoyed Mario Paint on the Super NES, and the 64DD seems like the perfect platform to expand the series on, mainly due to its saving capabilities. So, let's check out how good these titles are. There are 4 discs in the Mario Artist series on the 64DD from Nintendo. Mario Artist Paint Studio comes with a mouse which plugs into controller port 2. Mario Artist Talent Studio comes with a cartridge that allows you to plug in an AV source. It even comes with a little microphone to plug into a dedicated microphone jack. Check that out, that's awesome. Let's start with Mario Artist Paint Studio, as this one is by far the most accessible, and like I said, it comes with a mouse. You're gonna want that. You don't need the mouse and you can draw with a controller, but really I don't recommend that at all. The mouse feels good and it is very accurate and smooth. You have a few familiar tools to work with over on the left. It's all very similar to Mario Paint on the Super NES, but enhanced with 64 bits of power, naturally. If you make a mistake, you still have Undo Dog to take care of it. You can now zoom in several steps if you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty, and I find this quite helpful. You can choose from 3 different pen sizes, but unfortunately it always draws with anti-aliasing turned on. That means your lines are always going to be blurry and never sharp. The paint roller will fill in sections with your selected color. Thanks to the anti-aliased lines, it doesn't quite fill in the sections all the way, and it looks weird near the lines as a result. Speaking of colors, you now have many more to choose from compared to Mario Paint. That game was extremely limiting for a 16-bit console, and while I'm glad that it's finally expanded, it's still pretty limited for a digital paint program. The Nintendo 64 has over a dozen million more colors available than this. However, you can actually create about a dozen or so of your own custom colors using this little tool here. That's cool, I mean it's better than nothing, I guess. You have 4 different musical tracks to choose from, or you can turn it off completely. Of course, there are silly sound effects as you use each tool, and it just wouldn't be right without them, honestly. The game, well, I guess it's not really a game, but it lets you admire your finished masterpiece without the tool set on screen if you want. Naturally, you can save it to the disk as well, like I'm doing here. Unlike Mario Paint, you can save a ton of different drawings at once. There are other things on the disk, like this. I think this is some sort of animation thing or similar. I didn't spend much time here, and I didn't find the animation thing fun on the original Mario Paint either, so take that as you will. Next is some 3D thing with polygon stuff moving around that you can watch. However, you can actually draw on the textures. Here, I'm adding stars to the dolphin's head to make them like Echo the Dolphin on Sega. Now you can watch it back with all of your changes in 3D. I like the music in this particular scene, by the way. What kind of sucks about this title is there's no fly swatter mode like there was in Mario Paint. Weirdly enough, it was in the prototype of this, but they took it out of the final release. What the hell? Later on, I decided that I wasn't done with my drawing, so I loaded it back up. I remembered that I missed coloring in this finger. And you know what? These anti-aliased lines still bother me. You can fix them pixel by pixel if you have the patience. Fortunately, when it comes to paint programs, I absolutely 100% do. This is probably going to take a while, but it's going to be so much cleaner as a result. There we go. That looks a lot better than how I had it before, don't you think? Well, I sure do. You can also import pictures or whatnot from a Game Boy camera if you have an adapter. I have neither of those things. This one will also let you use the AV input cartridge to capture a frame. Here I have my Genesis hooked up, but it doesn't look very good coming in here. You grab a frame and then you can adjust a few sliders to make it look maybe a little bit better. Then you can draw on it or change it or whatever. The last option on this disc is a gallery, which performs a slideshow of all of your saved images. Mario Artist Paint Studio is a great title, and it makes me very sad that it stayed in Japan. If you enjoyed Mario Paint, you will absolutely love this like I do. Next is Mario Artist Talent Studio. In this one, you can create your own character. You have your choice of a limited number of head shapes, ears, noses, hairstyles, facial hair, clothes, and all that stuff. You can even draw on your face to put on your own makeup, or hell, maybe even some face tattoos. You can also just randomly generate a character if you'd rather do that. This one allows you to connect the microphone to the AV input cartridge. It will take a short sample of what you say and play it back with the music. Game set. You can also have your character walk around in a talent show type of thing. It'll take a picture of your character at the end. Of course, you can save the picture as well as your character to the disc. And like every other Mario Artist title, is compatible with the mouse, Game Boy camera, and the AV cartridge. Well, except for the next Mario Artist title. Stay tuned. Anyway, I tried hooking up an old standard definition camcorder to the video input jacks to capture my face. This is harder than it looks, trying to get my face centered and not dark as hell. Whoa, look, there's a Nintendo 64DD as I'm capturing this. The console is seeing itself live, it knows what it looks like. And then I point the camera at the monitor. Whoa! This is honestly the kind of stuff I did back when I got my first camcorder. I tried to take a few pictures, but I wasn't very happy. Eventually, the cartridge did not like the video coming from the camera, even though the camera itself was fine. So I tried a different camera, the exact same camera I used to shoot the very first episode of GameSack, in fact. Okay, I finally got a decent enough picture. Now it can be mapped so that it fits a polygonal character, or at least kinda. Not perfect, but not awful. GameSack. Gotta make sure to save this. Now my actual face can be on my character as he goes around and does silly things. That's pretty cool. I tried to load him into the animation studio that's also on this disc to see if I could do anything with it, but it wouldn't let me. Not sure why. In the movie portion of this disc, I was also unable to load my character. But at least I can walk on that sweet runway. Despite not being able to figure everything out, I had a lot of fun with this one. Now we have Mario Artist Polygon Studio. Here you can make 3D models, kind of. I really don't have much of an idea of what's going on here, and it seems like you can only modify randomly generated models and then save them. You can enlarge, shrink, rotate, and move different parts of your model around as you see fit. As far as 3D creation goes, it's extremely limited, but I'm sure talented 3D people could probably do way better with this disc than what you're seeing here. There's also a strange mode where you have your model run down a racetrack or something. Then it dies. Lastly, there's a gallery to view all of your saved models. This is the only Mario Artist disc that doesn't seem to use the AV cartridge. This one didn't offer me much at all. Even the music sucks. You can't change it or turn it off unless I missed something somewhere. The last one is the Mario Artist Communications Kit. Here, you can transfer all of your saved works from the other Mario Artist discs to this one for convenient viewing. It also allows you to upload them via the modem cartridge, which of course I can't do here in the 21st century. I always get an error when I try to transfer something to this disc, and I think that it might be because it's too full. There's already a lot of stuff on this disc, and I can't figure out how to delete it all. I mean, I'm sure I can if I try, but I'm just kind of lazy right now, you know? And weirdly, there's also a mode dedicated to playing around with the AV cartridge. Basically, it can add a lot of different video effects. Most of them are pretty choppy and silly. But it grabs audio from the camera as well, which I guess is neat. Hey, how's it going? You can't save anything or even grab pics as far as I can tell. It's just for playing around. Oh well, not really a whole lot going on here, but hey, at least now you know what it is. How's it going? Does this even work? I'm feeling that it does not even work. You know, it really is too bad that the Nintendo 64 mouse only works with those 4 Mario artist titles. Well, actually, I take that back. It does work with a Japan-only game called Dozaemon 3D. This is a shooter where you can design your own ships and stages. In the edit mode, the mouse is fully functional while plugged into port 2 as it was designed to be. This game was originally being designed for the 64DD, but as the platform failed, it was reworked to a cartridge and then finally released. In fact, make sure you don't have a disc in the 64DD when you boot this game up, or it'll get upset. And this is what it tells you. The shooter gameplay, of course, still requires that you use a regular controller. The mouse itself basically emulates the analog stick and buttons A and B, so you can kinda sorta play any game if you plug it into control port 1. But as you can see, this is easier said than done. Anyway, I've got a couple of cool games left to show you, so let's finish this up. Here's Japan Pro Tour Golf 64 from Media Factory and Sata. This is probably the rarest game for the 64DD. Like, recently sold for over $5,000 rare. What is it with golf games being so expensive? Neo Turf Masters on the Neo Geo goes for even more than that. So anyway, what do you get for your money? Well, you get a surprisingly decent golf game that's really not bad at all. But it's definitely a bit weird at first. Of course, it doesn't use the typical 3-button press swing, so my first shot was pretty bad. Though I broke my own record, hell yeah! It turns out that you're supposed to hold down on the analog stick, trying your best to get your club into the sweet spot, which is the yellow part of the orange bar. Then, you watch this red circle grow and shrink on the ball. When you feel all is good, you let go of the stick and your dude will take a swing. I seem to have the best luck when the growing and shrinking circle on the ball is absolutely as small as possible. When this happens, the game will announce how great you are.
Good shot!
Why, thank you. Everything else is fairly self-explanatory if you've played a golf video game before. After your first few holes, you'll be doing pretty well. My biggest complaint about this one is that you can't play alone. You're always with someone else, even if they're computer controlled. And yes, you have to sit through their shots, which can be dreadful in the tournament mode since there are so many other players. Fortunately, if you hold down the button, you can speed through their shots, so it's not as bad as it could be. Hell, you can even speed through your own shots after you hit the ball. Speaking of the tournament mode, here you choose from many different Japanese pro golfers. Obviously, playing as them will allow you to hit the ball further since they suck way less than your beginner character. You also get crowds on the courses when you play as them because people want to see them. They don't really care to see you, so the course is empty when it's just you and some other rando. You can choose to play on several different courses, which is probably where all the memory goes in this game. I like that each and every hole has a flyover as you play so you can see what you're up against. Don't worry, you can skip it if you want to. The graphics are really sharp for the console and look great. The anti-aliasing is turned off, so you don't get the typical blurry visuals. The draw distance is also quite good. The frame rate is variable, usually hovering around 20 frames per second or so, maybe a little above. It's never really an issue though. The objects like trees and stuff are all flat 2D sprites, but hell, I'm okay with that if it helps improve the draw distance in a golf game. The music is good for a golf title, but wow, I wish there were more tracks. There's only a few. It'd be great if each course had its own theme. As you'd expect, you can save your game and grow your golfer over time. Overall, this is a good game of video golf, but I recommend that you run it first before plopping down the $5 grand.
Good shot.
Finally, we have FZero X Expansion Kit. And that's exactly what it is. You need the FZero X cartridge to run this, and you get this screen if you try to use the disc by itself. You also need to make sure you have the Japanese FZero cartridge. The North American cartridge won't even boot at all if you have a 64DD attached, and you'll enjoy this black screen. It's pretty nice as far as black screens go, but that's not what we're here for. You can have the disc inserted before you power up, or insert it at any time the game is running. The next time you visit the title screen, it'll go from this to this. You now have more stuff to choose from in the menu, but we'll get to that. First, I just want to point out how awesome FZero X is. It's an excellent futuristic death sled racing game. It usually runs at 60 frames per second and it doesn't often drop. It's one of the few Nintendo 64 games that can even boast approaching this frame rate. Not only that, but the music is excellent with real sounding guitars and stuff. Sadly, on the original FZero X release, all of the music is in mono as they wanted it to fit on a cartridge and keep that cartridge at 16 megabytes. Though they could have used a larger cartridge if they really wanted to. They didn't, mainly because they knew the 64DD expansion would come out not long after. Anyway, here in the 64DD version, the music as you race is now in stereo. As a result, it sounds much better and more present. It's not something that everyone is going to notice, but I think it's a great touch. You can also change it back to mono if you have an aversion to quality. Next, the 64DD adds 2 new cups with 6 new tracks each to beat in addition to the 4 that were already on the cartridge. Not only that, but there are a few new musical tracks in these courses and they sound fantastic. These new courses certainly aren't easy, but they're definitely a lot of fun. You'll spend a lot of time with them for sure. Another new thing is the track editor. This can be overwhelming at first, but you can design the tracks in any way you want using the various menus and tools. You can even choose what music you want to play as you race. Provided that it's FZero X music, of course. You can't, put on some Sammy Hagar or Debbie Gibson or whatever. This is very similar to the tool that the designers used to make all of the tracks in FZero X. I mean, that's what it says on the back of the case anyway. See, right here. So as you can imagine, this tool set is quite powerful. Sadly, it doesn't use the mouse. You can also test out your track during the editing process to make sure it's what you want. What I'm showing you here is my first attempt, and it's barely scratching the surface of what you can do. Be sure to save and then register your track. The disc can save at least 100 user-created tracks. You can also design your own vehicle. This isn't as robust, but it's still cool. I tried to make mine look like a Captain Falcon version of one of those 70s Battlestar Galactica ships. What do you think? Did I succeed? Yeah. Once again, be sure to save it and register it. All of the many menus in these creative modes are completely in Japanese, so it helps to use a guide or your phone to translate them. There is actually an English translation of this that you can run on an EverDrive. Oh wow, it's great seeing what all the different menus are. The only problem here is that it won't save, and that is a big caveat. I imagine you can probably save using this on an emulator though. But even if you can't, at least you can learn what the menus do. The last new thing on the menu is the Edit Cup. As you've probably figured out, this is where you race on your created tracks, and you can even use your created vehicles if you want. Hell, you can even use your created vehicles in the normal game. If you can't come in first place on your own track using your own vehicle, what kind of human being are you, really? This whole disc can basically be thought of as DLC. Part of me wished that Sega would have used a Sega CD in a similar fashion, extending the use of cartridge games with new music, levels, and FMV cutscenes. It may have gotten less flack for having so many games that were basically cartridge games with CD music. I don't know, what do you think? Either way, this is a must-have if you have a 64DD and a Japanese copy of FZero X. It's one of the best games on the console, so I don't see why you wouldn't have it if you have the peripheral. I'm so glad that I finally got to mess with this.
Power!
And there you go, the Nintendo 64 DD. It's an interesting concept for sure, but it failed hard and it failed fast. That's right, even quicker than the Virtual Boy. And since so few were made, it sells for well over $1,000 these days, and I don't think that price is ever gonna come down, so you might as well just emulate it or run the games off of an EverDrive. Still, it was really cool to use this device. And what do you guys think of the Nintendo 64 DD? Let me know. In the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack. Usually at the end of GameSack, I have a skit, like this one, where I try to amuse you. But I'm going to do something different this time. I'm going to have the Nintendo 64 DD attempt to amuse you. This is going to be good, I can tell. There we go. Hi, Nintendo 64 Joe, how you doing?
GameSack.
Yeah, that's right. This is GameSack.
GameSack.
This is the end skit. We're supposed to amuse the audience.
GameSack.
Yeah, you're not too bright, are you, Nintendo 64 Joe? Hey, Nintendo 64 Joe, I've got a joke for you. What did the Nintendo 64 see on the other side of the road?
GameSack.
No, not GameSack. It couldn't see the other side of the road because there was too much fog. Okay, it wasn't that funny. Screw this. Guess I'm gonna have to entertain you now.